I could find the words to describe you now, as I'm lying next to you and the world goes quiet. Wish that I could make you see how you fit me perfectly. Fall for you.
Hola. We got the kitties here. We have our room all set up. It's nice and cozy. We have candles going. We have the diffuser. We have all of our birth stuff over there. We set up the birth tub. It's huge. Oh my gosh, so much bigger than I thought. I don't know if this like captures how big it is or not. Some more candles. We got our two kitties. They're gonna be big sisters.
The story left within tells me how to breathe. Wish that I could make you see how you fit me perfectly, and I fall for you again. We've been through it all.
Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. It has been a minute since I have vlogged, and this little girl is the reason why. So today I'm going to be sharing her birth story. I'm going to be sharing her name. I'm going to be updating you on just kind of like how life has been and what we've been up to. We will see if she will let me get through this in one take, or if I might have to like stop and go feed her and come back, but we will see. I know you can't really like see her right now, but I will insert some photos of her, or I will also come show you guys her after she wakes up, when she's awake, so that you can meet her and see her. She is so cute and she is so sweet and so precious. We are just absolutely in love with her. We have just been soaking in the last almost 2 weeks with her, and I'm just really excited to share her birth story with you guys. If you follow us on Instagram, then you would know that we had her at home, which I know was a big surprise to everyone because we did not share that we were planning a home birth online for a lot of different reasons, but she was actually born at home, and so I'm gonna share her story and kind of just talk about how everything went. But if you guys are new here, hello, my name is Haley. I'm a first-time mama to this sweet little girl, and I'm really excited to have you guys here. So if you are new, please make sure to subscribe. We're going to be sharing a lot of motherhood, our journey with motherhood, all that kind of stuff, and so it'd be really fun to have you. And if you aren't already, feel free to follow on Instagram. We post there all the time. I would love to have you over there as well. So let's go ahead and get into her birth story. So first off, her name is Nora Oakley, and we absolutely adore her name. I can share kind of about like how we chose her name and how we came up with it and all of that later on in a different video, but that is her name. She was born on Thursday, March 24th at 9:01 p.m. She was born at home, and I'm gonna share the story of how she was born. So on March 21st, we started to experience what I thought were contractions. Obviously, as a first-time mom, I'd never had contractions before. I didn't know what they felt like. This is gonna be a little bit difficult. I didn't know what they would feel like. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything, basically. And so I thought they were contractions because they were consistent. They were about 5 to 8 minutes apart. They were lasting like about a minute or so, 45 seconds to a minute long. And the only thing though was that I was feeling the majority in my back. I wasn't really feeling anything in my stomach. I'd been told that contractions felt like period cramps, and that's not what I was experiencing. I was experiencing it pretty much all in my back, which now looking back, I know that these were Braxton Hicks, but at the time we didn't know. They lasted until about 7 a.m. and so we were up all night, and they were pretty intense. Like now looking back and going through actual labor, I know that they are not that intense because I know what labor contractions feel like all the way to the end, and they are way more intense than what I was experiencing at that time. But at that time, they were really hard. We were up all night Monday night, and we didn't get any sleep at all. And so we met with our midwife on Tuesday morning at around 7 a.m. That's when the contractions stopped. And she just kind of advised us to just keep an eye on things, see if they continued or if they would stop. And I remember at this point, I felt like I had a really big responsibility to keep the contractions going because I wanted the baby to be born so bad. And when we met with our midwife, she kind of told me, you know, when labor actually starts, it will continue. You don't have to feel that responsibility. And also your baby will come, because at this point I had been wanting the baby to come for a while. I was 40 weeks in one day, and so I wanted her to come. So I felt that responsibility to keep things going. And she basically really helped me just realize, like, baby is going to come. I promise she is going to come, but it's gonna be in her time, not my time. So I did feel that relief of responsibility at that point. So contractions stopped at 7 a.m. after we met with our midwife, which was super weird. And we basically just rested that day. We tried to nap and make up for like the lost sleep. And then around 11 p.m. on Tuesday night, the contractions started again. And basically the same thing happened. We were up all night with these contractions, trying to work through them, but they weren't actual contractions. So early Wednesday morning, our midwife came again. And this time I did ask her to check me because I was concerned with like what was going on. I was curious to know if I was progressing, if this was actual labor, or what was going on with my body. And so she did end up checking me, and I was only dilated to a 1. And at this point I was super discouraged because we had been up for 2 nights and I was only at a 1. And our midwife was concerned as well because the labor had kept starting and stopping, and she had felt my stomach through a couple of the contractions, and they weren't feeling like actual contractions because they weren't contractions. And she was concerned with how fatigued we were going to be when labor actually started. When she checked me, I was only 1 centimeter dilated, but baby was super, super low. She was at like a 0 station or a +1 station, which if you don't know, you have to be at a +2 station to push. So she was super low in my pelvis. And I definitely could feel that. Yeah, so that's where we were at. And so she basically gave us some advice, and she said, you know, it's up to you. At this point, you could try to rest today and try to do 1 more night and see what happens and hope labor starts soon, or, you know, that you get a night of rest. Or we could choose to go to the hospital and get induced, just because she was so concerned with our fatigue. So that day, I was feeling very discouraged. Warren and I were both very discouraged. We were exhausted. So that day, we pretty much slept the entire day. We chose to try 1 more night, which I'm glad we did because this one came. But we decided to give it 1 more night, so we spent the entire day just sleeping. We both rested. I have a really cute picture of Lauren and our cat Nala that I'll insert here. And then when we weren't sleeping, we spoke with different family members and friends who had also had unmedicated births, and talked to them just for advice and just for encouragement and support. And that really did help us a lot with just feeling like we could do this and that things would be okay, and that we just needed to trust my body to do what it was supposed to do. So that day is also the day that my mom came. So she arrived at around like 7 p.m. and I went to bed at like 7:30 that night. So Wednesday, I went to bed at like 7:30 and slept until about 2:33, and then I woke up to what were actual contractions. They were super mild, and I finally was experiencing what people kept describing to me as what pre-labor would feel like. Basically, people had told me, like, when you're in actual pre-labor, you will just have like period cramps that are very mild. You should be able to just kind of like deal with them, not have to like really breathe through them. You can just kind of like deal with them, basically. And so around 2:30 a.m., that's what I woke up to. I just had some cramping, and they would start and stop, but I was able to just kind of like rest in bed through them. I was listening to like our birth playlist and just like sleeping, resting, working through them. And they did not stop, they kept coming. But at this point, I was not timing them. We basically didn't time like any of our contractions until our midwife asked us to, just because we had been timing them those other 2 nights and there was no point because they weren't actually real. So we decided to eliminate that stress and just kind of see what happened. So around 9 a.m., our midwife came, and we basically told her what had happened. We said we were able to rest all day Wednesday. I was able to sleep most of Wednesday night. The contractions I was feeling, they felt different than what I had been experiencing Monday and Tuesday. And I actually had a few contractions during the like 20 minutes she was here, and she was able to feel my belly and feel that the contractions were actually working. Like my contractions were actually productive, and this was actually the start of labor probably. So we were feeling super encouraged and excited, but I also was a little bit scared that as soon as she would leave, the contractions would stop, because that had happened the last 2 days. But she left and the contractions kept coming. So after she left, I started to get more and more uncomfortable. The contractions were coming pretty closely together. Probably they were at this point like 5 minutes apart, and they were lasting about like 30 to 45 seconds. And so I think at this point was when I started to enter into active labor, and that's what my midwife thinks as well, just based on what happened. And so I went into the shower and labored in the shower for a little while just to help deal with the contractions. And then at like around 10:30, I asked Warren to set up the birth tub because water was the most soothing and calming and helpful thing during our labor. So we utilized the birth tub in the shower a lot. But anyway, so around like 10:30, 11, Warren set up the birth tub and I was able to get into the birth tub. And that was like the most helpful thing for me during contractions was the birth tub. And during contractions, Warren and my mom would use a watering can actually, and they would like scoop up water and pour water down my back. And that was like the most relaxing, helpful thing for me during contractions. And we were in there for a long time. I would try to switch positions every like 30 minutes or so while in the birth tub, and my favorite positions to labor in were like on all fours. So think about like when you do like cat-cow yoga poses like that, or like squatting while holding on to the side of the birth tub. That was another one that I really liked. And I basically would try and switch between those two positions for about every 30 minutes or so. And at this point, the contractions were intense, but they weren't unmanageable. Like at this point, I was still able to kind of talk through them. Like if I started a contraction, I could like call for Warren to come help. I basically could just kind of work through them without that much extra support. And so we were in there for quite a while. So at around 1:30 p.m., things started to pick up a little bit more. Contractions started to get a little bit more intense. And the baby was so low in my pelvis, it hurt my tailbone so bad. I just had so much pressure on my tailbone, and that was like one of the hardest parts. So at this point, contractions were about 60 to 90 seconds long, and they were about 4 minutes apart. And so labor was definitely progressing. And we had texted the midwife and kind of updated her, and she asked us to start timing them, and that's how we knew how far apart they were and how long they were. But we decided to not have the midwife come quite yet because it was still manageable. I was able to work through them, and I really just wanted to labor at home with Warren and my mom for as long as possible, just because they were such big supports to me, and having like a calm environment where I wasn't stressed definitely was like really helpful for me during labor. At around 3 p.m. we decided to get out of the tub and try a couple different positions outside of the birth tub just to help things kind of progress. And see like how intense the contractions actually were outside of the water. So we went to the toilet, and so obviously like on the toilet normally you like sit that way, so you'd sit backwards on the toilet, and those contractions were definitely way more intense than in the birth tub. And the laboring on the toilet is supposed to help you dilate quickly. I don't know what it is about the toilet, but it's just a very good place to labor basically from what we've been told. And so while we were on the toilet, we were there for probably like 45 minutes, and Warren would use the double hip squeeze. If you guys know what that is, basically whoever your support person is can squeeze your hips during contractions, and it helps relieve some of the pressure. So he would do that while also holding a heating pad, because I was having so much pressure on my lower back and in my tailbone because she was so low, and it was definitely heightened outside of the water. So we held that for about 45 minutes or so, working through the contractions. And at that point, I had the longest contraction I had had ever up to this point, and it was about 3 minutes long, and it was super intense. And so after that contraction, we got off the toilet and went back into the birth tub. So at around 4:30, the contractions were very intense, like very intense. I was struggling through them a little bit. My mental space was definitely like starting to doubt if I could do this. And I started to say things like that. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I had so much fear that when the midwife came to check me that I would only be at like a 2. I just had so much fear about that because of the previous nights and finding out I was only at a 1. I was just so scared that she would come check me and I'd be at like a 2, and that it was this intense. At around 5, the midwife arrived, and she tried to check me in the water, and she was able to check me, but she said, I want to check you on the bed just to be 100% sure where you're at, just because in the water it can be a little bit more tricky to check, I guess. So we got out, went onto the bed, and she checked me, and I was at a 7, thank goodness. So when you're at a 7, if you're not familiar with like labor, that basically means you're at the start of transition, and transition is when a lot of moms will say they can't do this anymore, which is what I was saying. It's the hardest part of labor. It's also like the fastest stage of labor, and it's when things get really, really intense. And so while she checked me, she was able to feel that one side of my cervix was way more thick than the other side. So she recommended that for us to speed things along and for me to dilate quicker, to do a couple of different positions outside of the birth tub. And the first one she wanted me to do was side lying. And so basically it's when you lie on your side on the bed and you have your leg over your other leg. And she warned me, she said, these contractions that you're going to experience are going to be probably some of the most intense ones you're going to experience, because on this side your body is not as dilated, or like your cervix is thicker. We went through a few contractions and they were the hardest contractions of my entire labor, was while I was lying down. They were so intense. I really, really relied on Warren and my mom at this point to help me through them. Warren was helping coach me to remember to breathe, because I started to kind of like lose my breath. And my mom at the same time was kind of rubbing my back, helping me, just comforting me through these contractions. And so we stayed there for, I don't remember, it was either 3 to 5 contractions. We tried to stay as long as I possibly could, but they were coming so fast, they were so long, and I felt like I couldn't get a break, and they were so, so hard. So finally, after we did those contractions, the midwife asked us to try and do a couple contractions on the toilet again, just to help make sure things were speeding along. And honestly, at that point, those contractions were not that bad. Just because I had gone through like the worst contractions ever going back to the toilet, they actually felt kind of relieving. And we stayed there for about 45 minutes or so. While I was on the toilet though, my body started to feel the urge to push, and it was very bizarre because it started to push on its own, and I had never experienced that, obviously, and I didn't really know what was going on, but basically it felt like my whole stomach and like lower area were contracting. My body was pushing on its own, and it was very bizarre, and I was really concerned that I wasn't supposed to be having that happen to me, but my midwife said it's totally normal, just let your body do its thing and lean into what your body is doing. So we stayed on the toilet for like 45 minutes or so probably, and then we finally got back into the birth tub at around 7:30. So while I was in the birth tub, my body was pushing basically on its own, and my midwife said to, you know, try and push through the contractions if you feel like you have to push. But at this point I was so exhausted, my body was exhausted, it hurt everywhere just from squatting and pushing and like all of the things. I was just exhausted. And so in between the contractions, they did start to slow down a little bit. I think they were a little bit further apart, or maybe it just felt longer because I was so grateful for the break. But I could not talk through the contractions, I could not talk during the breaks. I was just so exhausted. I would try to like rest in between them and just sleep, even though obviously you can't sleep in like 3 minutes. I just remember being so tired at this point. And so after about 30 minutes, my midwife came back in because she had left, because just getting stared at is not very fun. So she came back and she was kind of watching me work through a contraction, and I looked at her and I was like, is there anything I can do to help this? Because I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. All right, I am back. She is just laying on me right here. She's awake. Can you say hello? Let's see, Mama can't see. This is her. This is little Nora. She's wide awake now. But she's just gonna sit with me and we'll see if she lets me finish telling you guys the story. I was in the birth tub and working through the contractions and beginning to push, but I wasn't feeling like they were productive pushes. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I've never pushed before. Bless you. So our midwife came in and I looked at her and I was like, is there anything I can do to help just progress this along? To help, basically. And she said, yes, I was gonna offer if you want me to help guide you, but you'll have to get out of the birth tub for me to be able to help you. And so I have never moved faster. I got out of that birth tub so fast because I was so ready to just meet her and to have her out. And so I got out of the birth tub and we went onto the bed, and then she was able to help guide me with how to push, because I've never done it before. And obviously, like, I feel like how I thought to push was like how you would go to the bathroom, but obviously that's not how it works because your baby's not there. So she helped me learn basically how to push. And so that was about at 8 p.m. was when we really started pushing. So these contractions, I don't even know how to describe them because they were not painful, like at all. They were just like, I don't know how to describe them, but they were just different. But they were hard because you're obviously using a bunch of your energy and strength and stuff to try and push a baby out. We were pushing, and at the point where baby Nora was trying to come through my pelvis, her heart rate dropped a little bit because she was getting like stuck. She was basically entering like the hardest part for the baby to come through. So our heart rate dropped a little bit, and our midwife just assured us like, hey, once she gets through this part, her heart rate will probably come back up. And so within a couple of pushes, she got through my pelvis and her heart rate went back to normal, which was good. And so after a few more pushes, she got out, and then it was really cool because by that point, we could start to see the baby's head, like just the top of her head coming out. I couldn't see, but Warren and my mom and the midwife could see, and she kept like sliding in and sliding out, sliding in and sliding out with me pushing. And so my midwife just helped guide me with like remembering that the very first push that I do with each contraction needs to be like the most strong push, basically, because that is like what gets her like the most momentum to come out. So we pushed for a while, and so at 8:59 she crowned, and so that means that the baby's head was like there and everyone could see it and stuff. And so my midwife like encouraged me to pause there, basically, because that would help my body not tear if I just paused there and breathed, and that was fine. So we paused there for a second, and then with the next push she like came out a little bit, so her whole head was out. And my midwife was like, Haley, look at your baby. And so I looked and I could see her. It was so crazy. And then the next push I was able to push her out because I hadn't seen her. And so she was born at 9:01 p.m. which was so fun and so crazy. And I always thought that like when I gave birth, I would cry, because I cry like watching other people's birth videos. And so I really expected that when she was born that I would start crying. But I feel like I was in such shock that there was a baby. Like obviously I knew I was pregnant and I knew a baby would come out, but it was just crazy to me that she was here and she was born. And so I was in shock, and I feel like I was so completely exhausted just with labor, and then also just like so relieved that it was over that I just like was in shock when she came out. And so the midwife like brought her up, and she was like sitting up kind of, and baby, she blinked twice, coughed once, and then she just started looking around, and it was like the most weird thing. And so she started to pinken up, which meant that she was breathing and all of that. And so the midwife was able to hand her to me, and she was on my chest for about like 30 minutes or so until her umbilical cord stopped pulsing. And then Warren was able to cut her cord. Warren was able to take her for a little while. I got cleaned up by the midwives. We went into the shower, and that part, honestly, like they were like, okay, get up. Like, okay, you're gonna get up and you're gonna go into the shower. And I was like, I don't think my body can get up right now. Like that was like a very weird like feeling that I wasn't expecting. Was just like, I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like my legs were just like, they gave out and they were not gonna work. And they like reassured me that it would be okay. And so they helped me go into the shower just to rinse off really quickly. So we got back into bed, and then our neighbors actually had brought over us dinner earlier that night. And so Warren went and made me a big plate of food, and so we were able to just lay in bed and eat. And then the midwife started cleaning everything up, and so they cleaned everything up. They kind of told us about what was going on. They did all of the things that they needed to do to her. They weighed her, measured her, and did all the things that they do. And so she ended up weighing 7 pounds exactly, and Warren got to lift up the thing to weigh her, and she was 19 inches long, and she was the teeny tiniest little thing. So sweet. And we just instantly fell in love with her. So as the midwives were cleaning everything up, we tried to get her to latch. She was trying to latch on to like Warren and my mom while they were holding her because she was so hungry. And so it took us a little bit to get her to latch, but she eventually did. And she fed, and that was like one of the things that she had to do before the midwives would leave. And we just kind of talked about like what to expect the next 24 hours, what to look for, stuff like that with her, with me. And then at around 11, they left, and everything was cleaned up. They put a load of laundry in, they put away the birth pool, everything was cleaned up, our house was back to normal, and then it was just us. And so we went to bed right away, and then she slept until like 3:30 or 4, so from like 11 to 3:30 or so, and she is a wiggle worm. And then I just remember we woke up at 3:30, I was feeding her and Warren was awake, and we both were talking, and I just looked at Warren and I was like, okay, it wasn't that bad. Like, it's so crazy. You hear moms talk about how like after birth, you just like instantly forget like how intense everything was and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna forget this. But instantly, like as soon as you have your baby, you just like, it's so worth it. And I would do it 1,000 times over for you. Yeah. So yeah, that is our birth story of our little baby. And now she is almost 2 weeks old. Today is Wednesday, and so she turns 2 weeks old tomorrow, which is crazy. I can't believe it. But she's so sweet and we're so in love with her. The transition has been going really well. I did not tear, which I'm really grateful for, and so that has made our healing journey a lot more gentle. And I feel like that really has helped me recover quicker and better than I expected, honestly. Breastfeeding is also going well so far, which I'm really grateful for. We just had our 2-week like checkup with a midwife for her, and she has gained a pound. She now weighs 8 pounds, which is crazy. She's so big. And we are just soaking up every minute with her, and we just love her so much. And she's perfect, huh? And so comment down below who you think she looks like. We've definitely gotten a lot of comments that she looks like me. But yeah, she's so sweet. But yeah, that is our birth story. That is how our little girl was born. And we are so grateful that she's healthy and that it was a healthy, happy birth. It was honestly a really positive experience. We couldn't have asked for anything better, except for maybe not those 2 nights that we had that weird back labor. Besides that, everything went really well, and we're really grateful and so happy that she's here finally. And I honestly feel so much better now than I did the last few weeks of my pregnancy, which is really good. So anyways, that is our birth story. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it, and stay tuned for a lot more videos and vlogs to come. I'm so excited to take you guys along throughout these first few weeks of motherhood and just us transitioning into being parents and all of that fun stuff. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Also make sure to subscribe, and feel free to follow along on Instagram. I post there all the time and would love to have you over there as well. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.